Today we're going to be doing a shootout between 3 different torque wrenches in the sort of budget category in order to try to figure out how much money do you need to spend to get a reliable torque wrench for use on a bike. Now, having a torque wrench is really rather important when working on a bike because there are quite a few components that require a specific amount of torque in order for them to be properly torqued down to the point that they won't slip or that they won't potentially break. And so a torque wrench allows you to know exactly when you've reached the proper torque, but it doesn't let you go above that torque, preventing you from potentially breaking the component. However, torque wrenches can be pretty pricey, especially for a tool that you're not going to use all that often. So the question we're going to try to answer today is, do you need to spend a lot of money to get a good torque wrench? And if you do go with a more budget option, are you giving anything up over the more expensive option? Now, this is sort of part of a larger series of torque wrench videos. I do have a full torque wrench shootout, which I'll link up here, between 8 different torque wrenches ranging from about $20 up to $300. If you're interested in torque wrenches, I've got plenty of content on that subject for you to peruse at your leisure. Today, let's look at the budget category and try to figure out whether or not these budget torque wrenches are able to do the job that their more expensive counterparts are able to do. All right, starting off at the cheapest torque wrench in the test, we have the Pittsburgh Pro, which can be found at Harbor Freight. This is the 1/4-inch drive, 20 to 220 inch-pound torque wrench, which equates to about 2.2 to about 22 Newton meters. This torque wrench retails for $18.99 at Harbor Freight, but it can often be found on sale for about $11.99. The second torque wrench in our test today is going to be the Amazon Basics 1/4-inch drive torque wrench. This one retails for about $31 on Amazon as of the making of this video, and it goes from 2.5 to 15 Newton meters. And then finally, we'll be looking at the Vibrelli torque wrench here. It's also got a 1/4-inch drive head. It retails for $49.99, and it has a range of 2 to 20 Newton meters. So those are our 3 competitors, again, ranging from about $20-ish up to about $50, which I think is sort of a good budget range for a torque wrench. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna head on over to my workbench, and I'm gonna sort of show you each torque wrench in a little bit more detail, and then I'll talk you through some testing I did on each torque wrench. And then finally, I'll come back here and give you my recommendation for which of these torque wrenches I think is the best option at this budget range. So let's go ahead, head over to the workbench. We'll talk about the testing we did. We'll look at the torque wrenches in a little bit more detail, and we'll go through some basic facts like the weight and the length and all that sort of stuff. Stick around, let's go check out these torque wrenches. All right, let's start off with the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh click type torque wrench. Get the torque wrench here. As you can immediately tell, it's a rather large tool. So this is definitely not a compact option by any stretch of the imagination. You have a standard 1/4-inch drive head here, okay, ratcheting, and you have a reverse switch over here. I'm not 100% sure if this works in both directions. I don't think so for torquing, and you're not really supposed to use this to loosen bolts, but it doesn't really matter too much on a 1/4-inch drive, low torque wrench for bikes because there really aren't any fasteners that are reverse thread that are under 10 Newton meters. To adjust the torque, you have 2 scales here. You have inch-pounds on one side, and then kilograms per centimeter on the other side, but there is no Newton meter range here, so that's a little bit frustrating. The way it works is you loosen up this locking knob here at the bottom, and then you would twist the handle until the line matches up with the line on the setting you want. So for example, we get the 0 to line up with the 60 right here, and that tells me that we're at 60 inch-pounds. Then you lock in that setting, you use the torque wrench, and then you're good. And then obviously with any torque wrench, when you're done using it, you want to set it back to its minimum. So same thing here, just open up the lock here, we twist the handle back down to minimum, lock it back up. I've owned this one for 8 years now, and it's still in good condition. I mean, I keep it in the case all the time, but as you can see here, it's in good condition. All right, the knurling is nice and grippy, it feels good. Again, this is not a bike-specific torque wrench, but it definitely does the job. All right, next up we have the Amazon Basics 1/4-inch drive torque wrench. Comes in this case here. Now, first gripe already off the bat is this case here, you can tell, wasn't meant just for this torque wrench, given the fact there's so much space here. This was meant to fit different size torque wrenches. And so it's not a very secure fit, just something to keep in mind. Okay, so here's the wrench. Definitely has a more compact head than the Pittsburgh, but definitely not a small head by any stretch of the imagination. Same system here. We have a reverse switch over here. You do have a push to unlock on this one, so you have to press on this button here to release whatever socket you have in there. 1/4-inch drive, pretty fine-tooth mechanism over here. Here we have a different locking system than the Harbor Freight. So basically what you do is you pull down on this release tab, and then you twist the handle, just like you would on the Harbor Freight. And then when you reach your desired spec, what's supposed to happen is that this little thing should just go up by itself, but it doesn't. You have to kind of push it back up, which is a little annoying. It gets stuck there, right? It is solid once you have it locked. And then you torque what you need to torque, right? And then to set it back down, you release, go all the way down, and then click it back up like this. Knurled handle, it's this orange color. Pretty nice. It definitely looks a little more premium than the Harbor Freight, but it doesn't feel quite as solid, which I guess could be a benefit in the sense that it is lighter, but the Harbor Freight does feel a little bit more quality to me. This just feels just a little bit cheaper. Like the tolerances are a little bit looser. You have a inch-pound scale on one side, and then you have a Newton meter scale on the other side. And the range here is 2.5 to 15 Newton meters, which does cover pretty much anything you would want for a bike. But it starts at 2.5, and the kind of frustrating thing here, which is a little bit hard to show you, but you have these numbers right here, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you would think this would work for Newton meters too, right? So this would be like 4.5, 4.6, 4. Whatever, but it's not, as I found out. This corresponds only to the inch-pound scale, which, it's a little frustrating because then it makes it kind of hard to set half sizes or to know exactly how close you are to that next torque setting up. So that is just something to keep in mind. The Harbor Freight is only inch-pounds or kilograms per centimeter, right? And so you don't have the Newton meter range at all. And the Pittsburgh Pro is about 2 to 20 Newton meters converted. This one just feels a little bit less well thought out, I have to say. Once it does click in, it feels relatively solid, but it definitely does feel a little bit cheaper than the Pittsburgh, I have to say. That's the Amazon Basics. So let's put this away. And now let's take a look at the Vibrelli, our most expensive torque wrench in this test. So you have a case here, and you'll notice that it comes with a set of hex sockets as well as some Torx as well. You have 2 through 10 for the hex, and then you have T10, T25, and T30 on the Torx, which is really nice. You really have everything you would probably need to work on almost any bike. You also have an extension bit, which is nice as well too. And then you get the actual torque wrench itself. So here we have the Vibrelli. You'll definitely see a much smaller head here. This is much smaller than both the Pittsburgh and the Amazon Basics. Still have that 1/4-inch drive, push to release like the other two, reversible, and you have a similar system to the Amazon Basics where you pull back on this locking tab. However, this one actually works. So you go to your next setting, you let go, and it's there, right? It springs back the way it should. You don't have to like push it back up. It actually just locks in there, and it's a solid lock. And the tolerances on this one just feels higher quality than the Amazon Basics for sure, I have to say. And it feels a little bit more refined than the Pittsburgh. Although, again, this is obviously much more expensive than the Pittsburgh. Knurled handle right here. The knurling isn't super sharp, so it might not be quite as grippy as the other two. But, it does the job. And your range here is going to be from 2 to 20 Newton meters, so a little bit of a wider range than the Amazon Basics, about the same as the Pittsburgh. Okay, so now let's go into some comparisons. Okay, so let's start off with the case, just the best quality case. I would order them like this, okay? Amazon Basics, the worst. It feels the cheapest, it feels flimsy, it doesn't really hold the wrench all that well. not really all that useful. Again, it's better to have a hard plastic case than not have one, but it's not a great one. So third place, Amazon Basics. Second place for the Pittsburgh. Solid case, holds it in there the way it should, right? It's not really rattling around all that much. This is a good case for the money. And then the Vibrelli takes the cake. It's got a nice latch on the case. It feels really solid, actually, this latch. I like that. The case does feel maybe a little bit cheaper than the Pittsburgh, but it holds everything in really well, right? Once you have the wrench in there, it locks in. It really doesn't move at all, the wrench itself, right? And you have space for everything else that you would need, right? You got your extension, you have your bits and everything. It's really kind of nice. So I think the case test goes to the Vibrelli in first place, second place Pittsburgh, third place Amazon Basics. All right, now if you want a compact torque wrench, well, these are not really it compared to other alternatives that are much smaller. So just to show you, for comparison's sake, this is the Giusta Forza 1-8, which I'll be showing in a different video. That is by far the smallest torque wrench here, as you can see, right? But usually the small ones are going to be a little bit more expensive. So of this budget test here, clearly the Harbor Freight is the biggest. It's not compact at all, followed by the Amazon Basics, and finally by the Vibrelli. First place for the Vibrelli, second place for the Amazon Basics, and third place for the Harbor Freight. Then if we compare the width of the head, the Vibrelli is by far the thinnest, and then again the Amazon Basics will come in second with the second widest head, and the Harbor Freight comes in third with the widest head. This is important for trying to torque down hard to reach bolts. I did a test where I tried to torque down the hardest bolt I have on my bike, my saddle adjustment bolt. None of these could do it. The Vibrelli did get very close because of its rather compact head. And so if you do need to get into tight to reach spaces, the Vibrelli is your best bet. But again, none of these are super compact, although the Vibrelli does do a pretty good job of it. Now, if you want a lightweight torque wrench, well, the Pittsburgh is definitely not the one for you, coming in at about 710 grams. The Amazon Basics is much lighter, but still relatively heavy at 387.1 grams for the wrench. And the lightest in the test is the Vibrelli, coming in at a respectable, although not super lightweight, 262.5 grams. Again, just for comparison's sake, this is a very small torque wrench. This comes in at 134. So that's sort of what a really lightweight torque wrench might weigh. So for the weight category, in third place, we have the Harbor Freight. In second place, we have the Amazon Basics. And taking home the win in the weight category is the Vibrelli. Now, all of these torque wrenches are what's called a click type torque wrench. And what that means is that once you reach your desired torque setting, the head will click, letting you know that you should stop applying torque to the wrench. Now, if the click is too quiet, it can be hard to know when you actually need to stop applying torque. And so a quiet torque wrench is not quite as good as a loud one. So in this test, we basically clicked all of these torque wrenches a few times in order to figure out which one was the loudest. In this test, third place went to the Amazon Basics with an average loudness of 72 decibels, followed in second place by the Harbor Freight with an average of 74 decibels, and the winner was the Vibrelli with a pretty impressive 77 decibels average for the click. And then finally, what we did is we tested the accuracy of each torque wrench using this digital torque adapter, which basically says how much torque is actually being applied to the fastener once the torque wrench clicks. Now, again, this is probably not the most accurate tester in the world. It's about $40, where most professional testers are like $400 plus. But it should at least give us some relative information. At the 3 Newton meter test that we first did, the Amazon Basics came in third place with an average error of 29% away from 3 Newton meters. In second place, we had the Harbor Freight with an average of 21.33% error from 3 Newton meters. And then the winner at 16.33% average error was the Vibrelli at this 3 Newton meter setting. At 5 Newton meters, we had a little bit of a reshuffling. So actually, the Amazon Basics won this test narrowly edging out the Vibrelli. In third place, we had the Pittsburgh Pro with an average error of 7.2%. In second place, we had the Vibrelli at 6.67% average error, and the Amazon Basics won narrowly at 6.6% average error. Again, these were all pretty accurate at this 5 Newton meter range, and so I was relatively impressed with all of them across the board at this setting. And then at 10 Newton meters, we reshuffled again. The Vibrelli came out on top with an average error of 9.27%. The Amazon Basics was second at 11.7%, and the Harbor Freight was third at 16.8% average error. If we average out all of those different error percentages, what we have is this order here, in which the Amazon Basics comes in last place with an average error of 16.03%. The Harbor Freight comes in second at 15.1%, and the Vibrelli wins at 10.76% average error. While these are all accurate, especially at the 5 Newton meter range, if you want to go low in the kind of 2 Newton meter range, the Vibrelli is definitely a better option than these other two, especially since it's smaller and more compact. Now, again, the tester I used was probably not the pinnacle of accuracy, but they were all tested on the same equipment, and it should give us at least some good relative information that will help us make some educated guesses about how accurate they might be and how well they might stay calibrated. And then the final test that I'll score out will be the sort of subjective build quality test. So which one feels the best build? And I would rank them like this. I would rank them like this actually. So the Amazon Basics to me feels the cheapest of the three. The tolerances just aren't very good. This is really annoying that it doesn't actually spring back, which makes me wonder how long it'll last. And even when it was brand new, it already had a ding or scratch here on the handle, so I don't think it's very durable, nor do they put all that much effort or thought into building this thing. In second place, Harbor Freight. Again, this is definitely not a super high end. I mean, it was, it's $11 to $18 depending on if you have a coupon or not, but it feels solid, and I've owned this specific one for 8 years, and it's still working great. The knob, the handle feels solid, the lock is positive, everything feels pretty well made. Again, we're not talking about a snap-on, but it is nice for the price. But the Vibrelli is the clear winner in the build quality category. It just feels the most well put together. Everything looks nice, feels nice. This springs back the way it should. The handle has sort of a nice weight to it as you turn it. It doesn't feel loose, doesn't feel overly tight. It's just a good high quality tool, I have to say. All right, so we've looked at all three of these budget torque wrenches. The question now is, which one should you buy? Where should you spend your hard-earned money? I think, honestly, for the majority of people, the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh Pro is the best option. At $18 to, as low as $12 with a coupon. I bought this one 8 years ago for $9.99. This is a really good deal, honestly, right? You're looking at, for sure, under 20 bucks, even at the full price. It's got a 1/4-inch drive head, which is definitely what you want. There are some minor annoyances with regards to the fact you have to convert from inch pounds to Newton meters. But if you're using this, sporadically every once in a while, it's not really a big deal. You just plug in inch pound to Newton meter conversion on your phone and you adjust for that. So it's not really a huge deal breaker, the fact that it doesn't have the Newton meter scale. Would that be nicer? Yes. And the more bike specific torque wrenches do have this, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. Now, the Harbor Freight was also pretty impressive with regards to its accuracy. At 3 Newton meters, it did struggle a little bit given the fact that this is pretty low in its torque range. But most things you're gonna be torquing down on a bike are gonna be 4 to 7-ish Newton meters, right? The majority of things, unless you're going with super high-end, carbon fiber components. So I don't think you need it unless you're working on super high-end stuff, right? And if you're spending the money on really high-end components, you're probably spending the money on a slightly more expensive torque wrench anyways. But I think for the average user, the Harbor Freight is really, I think, the best option. Again, it's the cheapest, it's accurate, right? Especially at that sort of 4 to 6 Newton meter range that's really most important for bikes. And it just works, right? It works. And I do think it has a better fit and finish than the Amazon Basics. It does feel better than that one, in my opinion. Now, moving up to the Amazon Basics, I would not recommend this torque wrench. For $31, it's not twice as good. If you're looking at $12, it's not close to 3 times as good as the Harbor Freight. Yes, you do get the Newton meter scale, which is nice. Yes, the orange handle looks a little bit more refined than the bare metal one on the Harbor Freight, but it just doesn't feel like it was built all that well, right? The little release knob on the handle doesn't go back up unless you pull it back up, which is annoying. And also, it's unclear how accurate those Newton meter markings are, because the little dial that has one integer increments on it, it's meant for the inch pounds, not for the Newton meters. So I don't really know how accurate this actually is with that little dial there at the bottom. So, for $30, I don't think you're getting much more than the Harbor Freight. It is a little bit smaller, right? A little bit lighter, which is nice, but not significantly. It's still not a compact torque wrench. It's not going to get you into those really tight spaces. So I think if you're choosing between the Harbor Freight and the Amazon Basics, take that Harbor Freight, save your extra money, buy some bits or something. I think that's a much better option. And then finally, we have the Vibrelli. Now, the Vibrelli is definitely the smallest of the torque wrenches. If we just look at it in comparison to the Harbor Freight, you can very clearly see the size difference here. And this is actually pretty compact compared to most of the torque wrenches I've been looking at recently. So this will be able to get into some pretty tight spaces. Again, it's not quite as small as some of the more expensive ones, but it's pretty compact, I have to say. It's accurate. It has the dedicated Newton meter scale and only Newton meters, which is important for bike stuff because that's what basically all manufacturers give you as a reading to use. Adjustment dial is smooth. It springs back up as it should, locks in place. The head is nice and small getting into tight spaces. It has a nice and loud click, which I think is nice, so you know when you're at that desired torque spec. And this is a great little tool, right? It also comes with all those extra bits, which will allow you to use this without having to buy anything else, right? Both hex and Torx. So it's a good value, I think, for $50, but you are looking at $50 compared to, potentially Lowe's 12 for the Harbor Freight. So I think if you're just going to use this very, very sporadically and you already have some, some 1/4-inch sockets or hex sockets laying around, I think still go for the Harbor Freight over this. I think this is a better tool, but $50 is sort of pushing what I would call the budget category. So it's kind of up to you whether it's worth it. This is better than the Harbor Freight. If I had to pick between the two and I was willing to spend up to $50, I would choose this, but I think the Harbor Freight is going to be more than enough for the vast majority of people. So that's it for today with regards to these budget torque wrenches. Let me know down below which one you think you would pick. If there's any other torque wrenches you'd like me to compare in this sort of budget category, let me know. I can try to get a hold of them and add them to this comparison. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. See you later.